see you guys in the dark.
My local internet cafe is not much of a sight to behold. I think that's what may have contributed to it shutting down for a couple months back in June. The exterior was reminiscent of an abandoned shack, with its appearance and broken windows. However, after they cleaned up the inside, I definitely saw some improvement. Sparkly clean tile floors and beautiful mahogany countertops filled the cafe with a sense of ease and elegance. I always got plenty of work done in there, so the shop's grungy look never bothered me so much. But it was nice to have a change of scenery once the cleanup was done. I was probably the only one regularly at the cafe, venturing in on almost a daily basis. Plenty of other folks cycled in and out, but nary a familiar face would show up. This was fine, since I only went there to edit my vlogs and website on occasions. Striking up a conversation with someone recognizable was not on the agenda, ever. I was there for some much-needed peace and quiet, not small talk. Though I had Wi-Fi at home, the thin walls there did little to muffle my father's drunken ramblings. The cafe was my escape from the unwanted noise. I strolled in on a Saturday morning, just 5 days after the grand reopening. I was feeling pretty groggy, still recovering from a cold I caught during the week. The humid August air didn't help matters. Because of this, I decided to grab a coffee before getting my things set up. I walked across the glimmering, newly placed floors and heard them squeak under my sneakers. I laughed a little to myself, almost tempted to start turning in place just to hear the sound a few more times. No, I told myself, you gotta grow up sometime. I ordered my coffee and took a look around the room while I waited for it. I took a mental note of how many faces were in the cafe with me. I was surely going to grab a quiet little table in the corner, away from these strangers. Small iced regular, the barista held out my coffee and straw. Thanks, I said plainly. I threw down a couple of quarters as a tip and strolled on over to a table I wanted. I spent the next few hours clipping and splicing my videos from the days previous. I was doing a week-long series about the gym I go to. Basically workout tips and some comedy bits with my buddy Jake, who works the front desk. I found myself laughing out loud over a protein skit he had done. I have drawn some attention to my little corner of the room. Though the staring eventually subsided, I felt it best for me to leave, as I had been there much longer than usual. I reached down and unplugged my laptop charger, and that's when my hand brushed up against something. Confused, I took a look under my table to investigate. A 16-inch black bag sat there, just where my feet were settled. It had pockets and a shoulder strap, as well as an abundance of dust coating the leather. Holy crap, I thought to myself. Someone must have left their laptop behind or something. At first, I was going to do the right thing. I very easily could have handed it to the barista and called it a day. I guess maybe that would have been the smart thing to do. However, a mixture of curiosity and stupidity came over me, keeping me from being honest. Instead, after packing up my own things, I swung the mystery bag over my shoulder and swiftly exited the cafe. Stupid. I pulled into my driveway about noon, the hot summer sun beaming down on my front lawn. My father was doing his usual half-assed inspection of the plants in the garden, beer can in his hand. I tried to get into the house without a word of him, but he stopped me just as I opened the storm door. Hey, why are you in such a hurry?" he asked, taking a swig of his drink. "Dad, I don't have time. Important website business, you know." Well, he slurred. "Don't stop on my account." "But you just stopped me," I thought to myself. I pushed through the front door, passing my sleeping mother on the couch, and darted upstairs to my room. Slam! I shut my door hard behind me and locked it immediately. I tossed my belongings and newly found goods onto my bed and kicked my shoes clear across the room. I was excited to dig into this lucky haul. Carefully and slowly, I unzipped the top of the bag and pulled it open. I gasped a little to myself. Despite the appearance of the bag, the contents were no joke. A shiny, brand new looking laptop was nestled nicely inside. I pulled it out and observed it with awe. I was certainly nicer than my basic 500 gig HP with a big box store. I couldn't believe what I was holding. I flipped it open and began feeling the keys and the monitor. It was in mint condition. I had to be the luckiest guy in the world. Everything was there, including a charger and a wireless mouse. I even found a bag of screen wipes at the bottom. I also dug into the pockets, curious as to what treasure I might find in there. What I found was a cell phone. Nothing special. Just some cheap Android phone. It was still powered on and had no screen lock on it. Exploring it further, I noticed there were no texts and only one recent call to an out-of-state number. Being into electronics, I went into the settings to see what kind of operating system it had. It was vastly out of date on software, still set in some variation of the Lollipop operating system. That's all right, I thought. I could still flip it for a quick $10 or so. I placed it on the bed next to the laptop and sat for a moment, trying to take in what I had found in front of me. This was such a great find, but I needed to power on the laptop and figure out what I was working with. To my excitement, there was no login screen. I was in immediately after booting it up. I was never into laptops as I was phones, but I could tell right away I was not working with your standard stock operating system. This thing resembled more of a modded setup that I had seen kids working with back in high school, but I couldn't name it off the top of my head. Luckily, it was simple enough to navigate. I set it up with my Wi-Fi and dived right into the file storage to get some idea of whose computer I had. I was disappointed for just a few minutes, but after clicking around a bit, I did find a folder labeled A. Inside was one JPEG, titled 1 by 1. Intrigued, my stomach did a little flip as I opened the image. I was puzzled by what I found. It was a screenshot from a website. It looked like a post from some forum, from a user named Anon and4, with nothing but phone numbers listed and 0 replies. Underneath the list was the tagline, "You know who you are." Scanning the image for answers, I noticed the address bar for the site. It seems to be a nonsense string of characters followed by a .onion extension. Onion? Wasn't that a parody news site or something? I wasn't too sure, but I decided to dig it up. I clicked on the X at the top, taking me back to the desktop. That's when I noticed another file. This one was labeled Pics, which stirred up some more thrills in my bones. Yes, I cheered to myself. This could be more likely to reveal the owner's identity. I became disappointed as I clicked through the pictures. There was no human life, just shots of different places and scenery. This included the image of a dark barber shop, a path in the woods somewhere, and even someone's garage. What really caught my eye was the last picture. It was the cafe. My stomach started doing acrobatics now. My heart was racing. Why were there random pictures in this thing? Why was there a screenshot of a message board with a list of phone numbers? The files just weren't adding up for me, but I hatched a half-baked plan. I didn't know if it was going to end the mystery, but I couldn't help but pry. I pulled up the pic with the phone numbers, grabbed the Android phone, and dialed the first number on the top of the list. After only 2 rings, I was greeted with silence. Strange, I thought, but I pressed on. I dialed the next number on the list. This time, it rang 5 times before I got a generic inbox greeting with the phone number listed. Interesting, but I hung up before I heard the beep. I grew bored of dialing random numbers. I decided to take a break and put the laptop and cell phone away for a little while. I knew I'd come back to it later. Once the evening rolled around, I waited for my parents to go to bed and then fixed myself up a snack. This was pretty much a nightly routine of mine. I clicked on the TV as I usually did and settled on the first news channel I scrolled to. This is when things took a turn for the weird. A breaking news story was displayed on screen, one from the next town over. Young barber, age 25, found murdered at work. Damn, I shook my head. That sucks. A female news reporter was on the scene, outside of the barber shop where it took place. Wait a second. I couldn't believe my eyes. That barber shop. It was the same one from the pic on the laptop. I was sure of it. I put my plate down on the coffee table and raced upstairs to grab the computer. I booted it up, clicked on the folder of pictures, and then the photo in question. I ran back downstairs with the laptop in hand and held it up to the TV screen. Yes, it was definitely the same barber shop. Wow, what were the chances of that? I was shaking my head in amazement. I finished watching the news story and began feeling tired. I was about ready for bed, so I grabbed my remote. The news story just after grabbed my attention before I could hit the power button. Cold murder in local forest. This was also nearby, just over the bridge in the opposite direction. This world is terrible, I thought. I hadn't seen two stories like that back to back in a long time. That's when it hit me. I scrolled over the picture of the woods in the same folder. Then I waited to see if the news story included the location of the homicide on video. Though I didn't get anything solid to compare it to, I was definitely getting weird vibes. First a barbershop, and now a forest? I had to be grasping at straws. I decided it was bedtime. I had a pretty restless night of sleep, tossing and turning and kicking my covers to the foot of my bed. It was hot and humid, and I kept waking up with the sweats. Needless to say, I was in dire need of coffee the next morning. I was probably smart to leave the strange laptop at home, grabbing my own equipment as I headed out the door. I drove rather quickly to the cafe, eyelids still very heavy. I got my regular coffee and sat down at my favorite booth in the corner. Only one other person resided in the building apart from the baristas at work. It was nice and quiet and felt peaceful. A good contrast from my evening snack and sweaty night of interrupted rest. Still, my mind couldn't help but wander. The web address from the screenshot I found came rolling into the forefront of my thoughts. What was that onion domain all about? Why did the web address make no sense? It was something like code influx, with random numbers and symbols after it. This was meaningless to me. I decided to do some research. I couldn't recall the exact website, but I remembered the .onion extension, so I started from there. I was immediately blown away. Apparently, what it pertains to is web addresses not reachable on normal servers. It takes you through something called Tor and is used for some pretty shady activity. I guess it involves what's called the dark web. I'd heard a little bit about this before. I was beginning to feel sick. The website listed on the wiki were pretty revolting to say the least. Nothing I would ever want to be involved in. The worst part, I was beginning to think the laptop I found was used solely to access this part of the internet. I couldn't bear the thought of being in possession of it any longer. I had to do something. I stormed out of the cafe ready to spring into action when I was stopped by a tap on my leg. I looked down to see a homeless-looking man in a black tattered leather jacket sitting up against the front of the building. His face looked rough, complete with a badly shaven beard and cracked lips. He looked miserable. He held out a small plastic cup, looking up at me with desperation in his eyes. "Spare change, sir?" "I'm in a hurry, dude. I don't carry cash." "Please," he begs me some more. He reached out and grabbed my pant leg. "No, get away from me." I kicked his hand away immediately. The guy looked upset. His eyes were actually watering a little bit. I felt a little bad, but damn, don't grab me like that. That's when the guy did the strangest thing. He took out a phone and started taking pictures of me. "What are you doing now?" I asked, confused as all hell. He didn't answer. All I could do about it was run to my car and leave as fast as possible. What was that guy's deal? I called my friend Peter on the way home. I knew he would have some more insight on this whole thing. I was hoping I could bring him to my house and have him wipe the computer clean. Then I could sell it to a random Yahoo and be done with this whole misadventure. Once I picked up my friend, I sped back to my house and showed him what I found in the cafe. He was blown away. This thing is lethal, he laughed. It looked pretty customized, honestly. Yeah, I noticed that, but take a look at these. I clicked through the photos, showing him the ones that I compared with the news story. So, you think this laptop has some sort of connection to the murders? I don't know, man, but I think there's something fishy going on. He shrugged and took over the mouse for a moment. Where's the picture of the phone numbers? It's somewhere in the file storage. Yep, click there and bingo. Peter stared intently at the list and address bars in the shot. He also checked the file description and saw that the screenshot originated from a laptop. So it was taken from within the device. My hairs were at attention, all up and down my skin. So, you tested these numbers out? Yeah, with this phone. I handed him the cell phone that came in the bag with the laptop, and he scanned through it rapidly. Definitely a track phone. Something bought as a burner, I guess. Possibly for some sort of business task. Shall we try another phone number? I nodded and pointed to the one just below the numbers I tested out. He dialed it in and threw it on a speakerphone so we could both listen in. It rang and rang. It didn't stop ringing, so we hung up after the 8th ring. Peter looked at the phone funny and then up at me. I don't know what's up with all of this. Did you want me to just factory reset everything? Yeah, I mean, is that going to take care of my problem? Not sure, but I think I'd like to have some fun with this before I call it a day. I gave him a look, a glance of disagreement. I didn't think that would be in our best interest. I don't think we should be messing with this dude. Come on, what could go wrong? You could even film it. This could go viral. Well, I'm not going to vlog me hanging around with a stolen laptop. Just do what you gotta do with it, and let's move on. Peter smirked, looked at the screen again, and then dialed another number from the list. Again, he got nothing. This time, just another generic voicemail box greeting. He continued on to the next phone number, and halfway through dialing, he stopped. His eyes were scanning the screen. His face was now white as a ghost. What? Why did you stop? Are you okay? This is my phone number. My heart panged like a club on a gong. That can't be right. I scooted over next to Peter and observed the screen. He was right. Just to be sure, he finished dialing and hit send. He put the phone up to his ear and waited. Just as he suspected, his pocket lit up, and his ringtone sang away. We both looked at each other in shock. Dude, my hands were shaking, and my mouth was agape so far. I think my jaw was brushing my bed sheets. How? Is all Peter could muster up from his racing thoughts. This is unreal. I don't like this at all. Just wipe the hard drive and let's be done with it. Wait, he shouted while looking at the screen again. My heart sank some more. I had a feeling about what he was going to say. What? Don't tell me. He didn't say a word. All he did was start frantically dialing another number. That's when I felt it. My pocket was now vibrating. I gulped so loud that I flinched. I reached down and pulled out my phone and answered. I held it up to my ear. Peter, I said through the receiver, looking at my visibly shaken friend across from me. This is messed up, he responded through the burner phone. I ended up driving Peter home shortly after. He had handed the phone over and told me he wanted to leave and take everything in. He left the laptop with me and told me he'd rather not mess with it. We decided to meet up at the cafe and drop it back off right in the morning. We'd wake up early and hopefully be the first ones in. However, I missed my alarm. Apparently, I also missed 10 calls from Peter. I opened up my messages and noticed the 4 text messages that he sent. Damn, I had to get going and fast. I had already packed up everything the night before, so all I had to do was throw on a t-shirt and shorts and head to the cafe. As I turned the corner to where the cafe was, I had to hit the brakes pretty quickly. What I saw on that road was nothing but cops and ambulances. There were roads blocked up on either side of the ambulances, and the cafe was barricaded. What in the... I was thinking out loud. This was crazy, There were people with their hands on their faces, looking scared and sad. I pulled over into the grocery store parking lot across the street and then walked over to the scene to get a closer look. I assumed Peter was doing the same thing. I ended up in a crowd of onlookers next door, looking at the scene before us. There was blood splatter on the front of the doors of the cafe and some papers, among other belongings strewn all about. More blood covered the ground. Jesus, this was a damn massacre. I could hear the people beside me whispering to each other about what was going on. They're talking about a possible serial killer, one woman said to her friend. The kid was about to walk in, and suddenly bullets came in from all over. Nobody saw who fired the shots. A guy filled his wife in about what he witnessed. I was too curious to just be craning my neck from back there. I needed a closer look. I peered over at the cops who were busy questioning a barista by the ambulances. I crept past the barricade carefully. I slipped past a couple other baristas and made my way to a second ambulance by the other barricade. The stretcher was in view now, but I couldn't tell who was in it. I decided to kneel down beside the ambulance and hopefully catch some conversation between the EMTs. I took out my phone and started recording. We lost him. He wasn't hanging in there much when we got here, but I was hoping for him. Jan, it's not your fault. You saved the girl. You can't save them all, you know. I wish I could. I heard him talk before he let go, you know. He told me his name was Peter. My hand jumped over my mouth as I let out the weirdest sound. It was a gasp, combined with a grunt of disbelief. No, it couldn't be. Yeah, the other EMT said. We gave his information already. Guess he was an IT guy for a local business. Smart kid, early 20s, I guess. I stumbled back a bit on my heels, dropped my phone in the process. I bumped into something solid behind me and stood up quickly. I turned around and saw that same homeless guy from the other day. My face was still contorted from the information I just received from my eavesdropping. The guy was just staring at me, stoic. He didn't even react to me bumping into him. He was glaring at me from behind, an unchanging expression. I couldn't help it. I booked it across the street to my car. I could feel tears forming in my ducts, eyes twitching in the wind from the open driver's side window. Why did I have to wake up so late? Maybe Peter could have been spared from whatever this was. A drive-by? An assassination of some kind? My head was dizzy. My heart was hurting, and I was beginning to make some connection. The pictures on the computer, the phone numbers, the murders, everything. I was getting an idea as to what it was I was dealing with. The stuff about the dark web, the strange laptop, and the phone numbers. I arrived home, heartsick as hell. My friend was murdered today, and I couldn't stop it. Maybe if I had never grabbed the computer from the cafe, he'd still be alive. Maybe if I hadn't been so stupid, I could have handled this whole thing differently, and he wouldn't be dead right now. To top it off, I realized I left my phone at the bloody scene. I groaned and threw my head back in the driver's seat. Now what? Well, my phone is near some cops and the EMTs. Maybe if I call, they'll believe I dropped it before they got there, and I won't get in trouble. I reached back and grabbed the burner phone out of the bag and started to dial my phone number when I suddenly had a thought. If the phone numbers were dialed somehow had something to do with the murders, that must mean... I grabbed the laptop out of the bag, my heart racing and body profusely sweating in fear. This whole thing was unreal. The fact that I was right in the middle of it was even worse. I clicked on the folder of the pictures of scenery from earlier. Again, my eyes scrolled through across the picture of the barbershop, then the forest. Finally, my eyes got to the picture of the cafe. Yes, the phone numbers in these locations have to somehow be tied together, but I didn't know how. Why was this happening? I was about to leave the folder, but then a small thumbnail at the end of the list of pictures caught my eye. I hovered the cursor over it and opened it up. With some cloud service, the image was revealed. My jaw dropped in utter horror. A picture of my house. I was looking at a picture of my front yard and home. I hadn't noticed this before. Why hadn't I noticed this? Over in the top corner was a link, one that opened up the full cloud folder from some email made up of more gibberish characters. This folder contained more pictures. Pictures that were very different from the others. "No way," I shouted out loud, face contorted in anger and fear all at once. Pictures of me looking directly at the camera, others of my car. The last ones were me of sneaking into the crime scene at the cafe. That guy, that homeless-looking guy from the other day, and behind the ambulance. I have his laptop. He was watching me. How did he tie into these murders? My silent tirade was interrupted by the sudden sound of a jingle to my right. The phone was ringing in my passenger seat. I picked it up and peered at the phone number. I couldn't handle this anymore. I just couldn't take it. It was my own phone number. Grudgingly, I decided to swipe and answer the call. Who is this?" I stammered. A gravelly voice answered from the other end. "Spare change, sir?" I had 3 aliases which I used, but only a close online friend of mine knew that all were mine. Nathan was my main link to the dark web, since he somehow spent more time on it than I did, even when the only thing I did other than ghosting him was playing Halo with him for my friends list. What I liked about him is that neither of us mentioned our last names or any real information, even though we both could have looked it up at the time and found pretty much whatever we wanted about the other person. That being said, I trusted Nathan more than almost anyone, and he knows more about this story than I'll be willing to admit on here. During university, I roomed with a local dealer who, unknown to the education board that expelled him, worked for me. It was freaking easy to order narcotics online like MDMA and X if you knew where to look. I even had them shipped to my dorm room's local P.O. box at one time without anyone being any of the wiser. I'd get them online. My former friend would use his real-life connections to sell them once I didn't really have any of my own. This was around the time that I felt that I held all the cards, and no one could touch me if they couldn't track my IP address. I was in the second year of my biomed course when I got into the stupid shit. Scumbag pieces of crap would be sharing snuff videos online that would make even the most messed up pornography you've laid eyes upon look freaking like white bread. This was why I only used links that I either found myself, or more often the ones that Nathan had given me. We would spend days, literally days, just marveling at all the crazy shit which people could get away with. Yeah, the government had shut down the main sites like Silk Road and Mad Onion, but those were like the only ones that the idiots online seemed to ever take notice of. Other hackers would message me on forums asking for sites to get weed and other drugs from, which was as simple as pointing in a freaking direction. The university claimed to monitor internet traffic to stop people from doing freaky things online after they heard people were hacking students' accounts and ruining online schedules. But I guarantee you that they did absolutely nothing to people who were actually doing it. Note, I'm not confessing to having done any of these acts. I just know exactly which individuals have done it. By third year, I had made enough money to have a long screen setup of my own, which made decrypting sites' details a lot quicker for me. And I actually had gotten pretty good at it. I had been delving around some messed up sites, and to be honest, I'd even talked in chat rooms to some of the admins in charge of them. You'd be surprised how normal a child actor site owner would actually seem if you didn't know he also had a day job. I got more curious, though. Stupid me. After nearly 10 years of seamless making my way out of the dark web, I joined Nathan as well as a few others in the chat room, just screwing about and sharing some screwed up sites. Might sound weird, but for me it's a pretty everyday thing to do. Nathan and another friend were talking about some site that no one had managed to get past the encryption, to apart from one of the other people who's even more of a no-life than me. The rest of us are pretty sure he's autistic or some crap, because the site he shared with us was arguably the most vile thing I've ever laid eyes upon. For those of you still with me, this is why I'm posting this here. This guy is the most cancerous and revolting sector from the darkest part of the deep web. It is a scar that I bear to this day, and it is one that I will never, ever forget. The site had a subheading in the HTML. The autistic dude was in the chat room earlier and gave Nathan and I an encrypted URL for us, but he was too freaking giddy about getting through to the site himself to send us an encryption. So Nathan and I had to manually go through the whole process ourselves. We tried for hours. Nathan and I had been doing this for the entirety of our adult lives, yet we've never seen code like this before. Come to think of it, I doubt that the other guy in the chat cracked this by himself. Nathan and I both called it a night, so I left the command prompt open and went outside to smoke. Nathan remained on the chat so we can play Anvil, but when I got back, his microphone was muted for some reason. For people like us who had nothing to hide from each other, we almost never muted our mics. I waited a few minutes, thinking maybe he was jerking off or maybe gone to do something. Nothing. I don't think much of it. My brain is too occupied with the cannabinoids flowing through my bloodstream. I sat down and took another look through the code, thinking there was something that I missed. I did. The code was completely different this time, completely unencrypted. I simply launched the URL and my PC Word for a little bit, until finally opening up about 20 windows across my two monitors, all of them scrambling code through a debugger that I had installed. Even with 32 gigabytes of RAM, my computer was making more noise than it ever did doing this kind of stuff. I thought to myself, shit, I'm going to have to OC my shit in the BIOS if I was going to have a shot of getting through. And I was not feeling up for it after smoking too much. I get ready to hard reset before my monitors turn off, and back on one at a time. This was when I started getting a bit paranoid and was thinking about just letting it go. I wish that that's what I did. The windows were almost all gone. Only 4 still were there, and 2 of them were normal deep websites that the admin probably used to relay the IP address through. First site that I had seen do that. All of the text was a dark red and extremely primitive for a site that I thought would be at least a little bit more impressive considering its security. The main center window had only a small amount of text on the screen. If you made it this far, you know what you are in for. If you still don't, you don't belong here. Even though I was feeling mellow, the text and sheer awe of what I was getting myself into pierced me with fear. A simple Y/N prompt popped up on my window. I accepted, ready for whatever awaited me on the other side. A chat room window came up to life in the second remaining window. I was wondering what it was for. Perhaps another IP relay, or a shadow app that hid the true nature of the site behind it. It simply stated, /insert name, as well as an optional password that I'm still not sure what that was for. The fact that people might have accounts on this kind of site. Looking back on it, it's pretty fucked up. I used my most recent alias, Diablo. A couple more scrolls of red text flew up the window, and then it opened up into an actual sort of chat room like you'd see on Omegle or some crap like that. Except with no ads, or color, or anything besides the dark red text. The chat was a bit more advanced than the first window, which was now frozen and wasn't responding to any console commands I was using. I have to say, the feeling of finding this site in the first place felt pretty awesome. I couldn't wait to tell Nathan. That was until the chat window popped up with names. One that I recognized was his, using one of his aliases as well. I'd say about 36 people were in the chat room. No names that I can remember. And even if I did, I wouldn't dare reveal them. Not after all this. I tried calling Nathan on my phone, but he obviously wasn't picking up. We're so screwed. It was stupid of us to delve this deep without even knowing what we got ourselves into. Users definitely had met before, as they immediately started posting messages to the window, as me and Nathan remained silent. As they were casually talking about stuff, I was starting to calm down a bit. Maybe this was just a stupid cult website that talked about organizing deals or other dumb stuff that I've found in the past. It all seemed so normal. So why all the obscurity? The first window, still blank and unresponsive, suddenly began loading up a video file of some sort. A snuff video, perhaps? It would make sense to hide one, but not this extensively, and the chat room didn't make much sense. I wish this stuff had been going through my head at the time, if I wasn't retarded enough to get stoned before going through this. I felt tempted to ask the other users what the video was about, but I was afraid that might give me away as someone who's not supposed to be there. Nathan hadn't said anything either, so I wasn't going to risk doing something suspicious like that. I got the guts to ask, "What are we all here for, thanks?" Trying to sound as eccentric and dim-witted as I could. I didn't get a response from them. As a matter of fact, no one said another word. Nathan stayed quiet, but I assumed that he noticed me in the chat as well, now that I'd posted. The video had stopped loading and had begun playing. Some more messages from the other users sharing their anticipation as footage of a dark gray basement somewhere took shape on the screen. The resolution of the video was pretty awful at first, but rendered pretty well after about 30 seconds. I was scared shitless. No one else was in my house. Most of my roommates had left for summer vacation, and I didn't head home for another 2 weeks. I was alone in the dark with little else but the ambient sound of whatever was happening behind the camera in the video. It stayed like this for about 4 or 5 minutes. I spent every second of it staring at the screen, waiting for something to happen. Finally, a dude steps onto the screen holding up a whiteboard with foreign letters on it, as well as the words "cold body" underneath. The guy was freaking ominous to look at, pretty overweight, and what only could be described as a motorbiker's beard. The man spoke. I had no idea what he was saying at first. He was speaking in Chinese, I think, but I don't really know. I'm not a fucking linguist. Luckily for Nathan and I, the man had another person behind him who spoke some broken English. "Hello, users. Welcome to Cold Body Show." I think that's what he said. I was honestly more interested than scared at this point. This video looked like it could be something worth showing to others. That thought never crossed my mind again. The man with the broken English bursts into tears and sobs out of nowhere. He sobs in front of the camera and jerks around in what I can only guess was desperation. The man holding the sign yells at the guy in Chinese before another man enters the frame and puts a gun to his head. Before I can even realize it was a gun, the man fired. He didn't stop there. Pressing the barrel of the gun against the dead man's temple, he fired again and again, each shot spraying blood and what I guess were mere pieces of the skull all over the place. Okay, so a shock video. Not much out of the ordinary here. That was when I stared at the chat window again. The users were talking about what they would do next. Users were all typing in different languages, but almost all of the English ones that I read said, "Shoot him again." I realized then that I wasn't watching some shock video or stupid snuff film that the admins had hid behind the wall of proxies. This was a live stream. I was watching a live stream of people getting murdered in front of me. We all were. I type into the chat, "You sick fucks. And what the heck are you guys doing?" But the texts weren't responded to because so many people were spamming the chat with foreign text that I couldn't read. Another person is brought out in front of the camera, this time already sobbing and trying to break free of the ropes that had been bound around her ankles and wrists. She was bare naked and covered in bruises and cuts. I didn't do anything but wait for the inevitable. The man shot her in the head and watched her body fall limp on the floor. People in the chat cheered and asked for more. Someone picks up the camera and positions it in a different direction towards a metal table, covered with some sort of bin liner. The woman was dragged by the hair into the frame and placed on the table. What happened next? I don't think the world should know. I'm not kidding. The body was slumped on the table like a surgeon would do before operating on a person. Some more people, wearing red and black ski masks, went up to the body holding items varying from kitchen knives to cordless drills. I couldn't watch without feeling physically sick to my stomach. The men tore her apart limb from limb, stabbing at her torso and cutting her open. I take another glance to see one of the men having relations with the mutilated corpse. I almost immediately retched and almost vomit over my keyboard when I gained control of myself before that happened. My heart was beating like crazy. The whole situation was so messed up, and I was in way over my freaking head. By the time the men were finished, there was a literal stump of a human being left. Not that they could fucking call that a human anymore. Her head was torn off, the neck, and stuffed into her body cavity along with one of her arms. If it weren't for the other weird sights that I have seen before this, I might not have stayed as long as I did. 3 more people were brought out onto the screen, all of them screaming for their lives and trying to escape. One of them is shot in the leg. The others stand there shaking in place, trying not to scream again. The man holding the sign walks up to the lens of the camera and stares into it. I see his black eyes, blood splattered across his face. I breathe faster, and I actually had to look away. It was like he was staring right at me. He says something else in a foreign language, probably the same one as before. When he stops speaking, the chat window does the same. Hardly a single other post, just a chat window awaiting some response. About 20 seconds pass of him just staring into the camera after speaking. Nothing happens at first. The chat then mentioned me and Nathan by our usernames. More of them spam our names in posts that take over the scrolling message board. As soon as they mentioned our aliases, I started freaking out. I try to close the black windows, but every time I try, the window says the application is not responding. The live stream continues. The man staring at me, and the message prompting me to say something. One of the few comments in proper English pops up. He's asking us which one to end first. I freeze for about 5 seconds before unplugging my computer from the wall. I didn't care about anything anymore. I just wanted to leave the site and never come back. I sat there with a blank screen in front of me for a bit before pacing around the kitchen. I was done with it. I didn't sleep at all. I was too traumatized to even think about resting after what I had seen. At the time of this happening, I was thinking about reporting the site to the police, but I, of all people, know that they can't do anything to stop this. To think that more of these sites could exist, that more people are getting gunned down and mutilated for entertainment, it's something that I can't freaking think about. I spent 2 days talking to some close friends about this stuff, though I left out all the details and just said I'd seen something disturbing online. They all know what I do in my free time, so they didn't think much of it since I'd mentioned snuff films and messed up sites before. They didn't know what Nathan and I had seen. I mustered up the courage to turn on my PC again, and I was fucking relieved to see no sign of any viruses, and most of all, no black window screens scattered on my desktop. I immediately go to check to see if Nathan had left me any messages on Radot. I had several messages from him with a few files attached to the second. I was hoping to talk this whole ordeal through with him, but the files immediately caught my eye. The attachments were pictures of me, stolen from my Facebook and email. Pictures of my old school, university, and even my friends here. The messages after were all my addresses, email, online aliases, and even the names of my family members. My IP address was posted to the bottom, and I realized how screwed I am. The last picture of me and my old girlfriend, with her IP address and details pasted on the top of the picture. There's no freaking way that they tracked me down. I take a few minutes to pull myself together before writing back. What the fuck? I didn't get a response, and I still haven't to this day. He has all of my details. He knows everything about me and my family, and I don't even know what else. I still don't know what has happened to him since I left that live stream. I can only pray that the information he has doesn't fall into the hands of those murderous, insane motherfuckers who killed and desecrated dozens of people on the darkest parts of the internet. I can't let them find me, or those that I care about. I will never go back to that part of the internet ever again. It's not safe for me, or you, or anyone else. The police can't find them, but they can find you. Don't try and find the site. Don't try and report the site. they will do to you what they did to me. And if you think that they won't find you, then remember that I was fucking invisible. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.